super excited and feeling really a ton of gratitude as well to be hosted by our friends at Culture Kings. They've allowed us into the studio to work through a little bit of content creation here before we get started with some of the other festivities through the remainder of the day. But I thought that we could begin our conversation with a little bit of off-roading, like a little bit of just, I guess, table set on who you each are, how you fit into the organization. And I think it would be great to get a sense for how the operation fits together. Super scaled, super successful, really impressive. And I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the pieces and how they're organized and why. And I thought, John, we might start with you, U.S. President of Culture Kings. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you came to this organization and what your day-to-day looks like?
Sure. Yep. My background. I like to use this term sometimes, but I'm a recovering creative director. It's probably the best way to talk about my background quickly. But spent 17 years at Adidas, a bunch of years before that with the brands of Reebok and Fila. Always been a kind of like sports apparel, footwear, and headwear kind of business. So yeah, was a creative director for many of those years and brand first type leader. Joined Culture Kings in June 2022, so right before this store that we're sitting here actually launched. So yeah, a couple of lead ups to that, and then we have the global flagship of Culture Kings, kind of how we think about it. It's the world-class kind of expression of Culture Kings.
I think that is understating what you've got going on outside, for sure. It's incredible. And then Monica, I believe Senior Director of Brand Marketing at Culture Kings also. And I think John was sharing with me earlier that you joined actually a little bit before he joined the company. When did you start?
I started about like 3 years ago, maybe a little bit over 3 years ago now. It's been a great journey, and I feel like we're just getting started.
Awesome. So what does your kind of day-to-day look like, John? What does your day-to-day look like, Monica? What are some of the other like core elements or teams of the broader Culture Kings operation? And how are you working with each other? Like how does it all fit together?
I could take a strike at it. I mean, it might be helpful to like think about, who Culture Kings is and where it came from. So it's, we're about a 15-year-old business in Australia. It started as an Australian retailer and brand. And I say brand because it really is a brand in an ecosystem that kind of delivers this retail experience that is Culture Kings. But about 15 years old in Australia, like I was saying, about 2.5 years old here in the U.S. So relatively speaking new. The unique thing about Culture Kings is actually when it was in Australia, it's indexing off U.S. trends and U.S. kind of movement of fashion and streetwear. And here we are, years later, bringing that back to its kind of index market of the U.S. So, which is interesting, Monica. I spent a ton of time talking about this. Like, how do you actually move needles in the U.S., which is obviously moving needles in Australia is quite different. So, significantly bigger market in the U.S. The brands we have, the assortment of product we have, all of them are very intentional to continue to kind of carve off a space, that's unique and different. We talk a lot right now about like the exclusivity inclusively of kind of like customers and experience. So like you look at that headwear wall we have outside, 3,000 hats on that headwear wall, 99% of that is actually exclusive just to Culture Kings. We had this kind of ecosystem and to be honest, you talked about the infrastructure support this like flywheel of exclusivity and newness and just constant drops and fresh. So we spent a lot of time making sure that we can support that on all sides, from product to buying to the way we take stuff to market and how the app rolls into that, how we early release stuff via the app and keep driving culture.
Incredible. So Monica, you were sharing that you were here and involved in kind of the very early innings of designing the store and building it. Maybe we can get in post-production, like the picture of you in the hard hat.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear a little bit about the brand vision for the store, like what some of the strategy was that you were trying to execute on, like from the beginning. Maybe, other ideas or things that came to be in flight and how it's evolved or iterated, just anything that you'd like to share. I mean, I'm blown away by this space. It's the first time that I've physically been here. It's incredible. I've never experienced anything like it. And it sounds like you were integral in bringing a lot of that to life. So curious to get the brand perspective.
Yeah. Well, so when I joined the team, a lot of this was already, underway. And my role in all of this was really, okay, as soon as this concept comes to life, how do we keep a steady beat? There's always something going on. We're always on here. Like you mentioned, when I started in the early days, it was very much still a shell. It was very much a rough draft. We were essentially pitching different opportunities with different partners and talent just based off of renderings. You were asking about the day-to-day earlier. We are very anti-transactional. I think all these products are accessible online, right? And anyone can be transactional. So to stand out, you really have to be experiential. And I think people like to throw that word around and they like to think that they're experiential, but every day for us is pretty different. But the one thing that sort of glues it together, like everyone on the team is always thinking, how can we do it differently? How can we, give our audience something that they can't experience elsewhere, that they can only experience at Culture Kings, whether that's, the app experience, whether that's in-store events and activations or people that we're partnering with or content that they're seeing, that it's Culture Kings because it's unlike anything else on the market right now. I think we've been really fortunate that we do have such a unique space. I'd love to kind of get your reaction on how it compares to any other space you've been to, but there's just always something going on here. It's been like that since the early days. And we have the space, 22,000 square feet. We have 30-foot ceilings, 2 levels. We have all these really cool features that, again, it's not really a store. You don't just walk in and you buy something. You walk in and it's an experience. If you walk away with some products and you buy some stuff, like that's cool. We want to create these like lasting memories and experiences when people come and experience it. They go home like, wow, I feel like I was in the Disneyland of hats and clothes and jackets. So, as long as we accomplish that, I feel like we're successful. And then, like I said, with all of the different events that we do, whether it's for F1 or, we did a big Super Bowl activation last year, really just want to, kind of tie in that experience and we talk about this all the time, but be the collision of, sports, music, and fashion.
So, John, from a business perspective, as you're working with Monica, with the other teams, you guys are beating up, creative concepts on what kind of exclusive, immersive activation could be done, what new thing could be added to a store. How do you tie that back to the business result? And how do you think about justifying, with a business case? Like, how do we make decisions that ultimately, need to have dollars and cents kind of outcomes? Just how do you think about that? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I don't know if there's always like one singular formula. Maybe is the best way to think about it for like how we lead, to be honest, like within Culture Kings as a kind of like an operating kind of culture. And I talk a lot about like the rhythm, how we're operating, the decisions we're making, how fast we're making decisions. And we do fly through days. I mean, we're a small organization and yet we're scaling at a rate that is pretty attractive. Obviously we're in the business, right? I mean, we're all delivering top line, we're delivering EBITDA, and we need to continue to build that trajectory. The way I think about like a lot of, Monica and I when we first started talking about Culture Kings and having an impact in the US, it was like, how are we going to move those needles I was talking about earlier, right? And it was like, we're not going to go to every concert in the U.S. and just walk around with bags of money just trying to get the next guy to endorse Culture Kings. So we took a path with Rolling Loud, for instance, and Summer Smash, which is out in Chicago, music festivals. And we're on the emerging artist stage. We're partnering with creators, makers, and builders because really Culture Kings, in particular the U.S., is very much that. Like we are a bunch of builders. And we're kind of tying ourselves to people who are creating culture and moving needles. So we did that not just from a, an overall like strategic standpoint with like partnerships in music or partnerships with brands. It's kind of like woven into who we are as a business, to be honest. We were talking about what do we do for F1? We launched a store in November 22. 23 was our 1-year anniversary lined up to the first inaugural Grand Prix of Las Vegas. So the first F1 exercise. It's like, well, how are we going to have an impact? So we partnered with McLaren and Mitchell & Ness and built a whole exclusive range of product. We had Lando come by the store, which was great. We had a car downstairs. We partnered with Jack Daniels up at the bar. So it was a full immersive experience of Culture Kings and, a whole new customer base that had never heard of us, right? So, which was also super attractive to people like McLaren because it was like, we're bringing this young kid, this cool kind of streetwear kid to the brand of McLaren. And by the way, these guys are winning all over the place. Like, we just had Piastri win in China and And Melbourne was actually Lando too. So like, how do you build these relationships with people that kind of share values, to be honest, whether it's technology, whether it's partnerships, and how do we continue scaling in a pretty interesting way? So today, like, we have incredible partnerships with people like New Era, like I was saying about the headwear wall. I mean, 99, great hat, by the way. I think that's called Wheat. Yeah, we have great partnerships with some leading brands, partners at ASICS and New Balance, just continue to be great stories for us. The interesting thing that we have is we also have a lot of in-house brands. They're not called Culture Kings, but Loiter, St. Morta, Carre, some of these in-house brands in our portfolio. And then we'll take WWE and Loiter, and we go to Complex Con and really start to exercise Loiter as an independent brand, but under our kind of house of Culture Kings portfolio brands. So we have lots of ways we can execute. And then our job, Monica's job, my job, is to continue building these brands, which the result of that is growth, financial growth and brand growth. So
Very cool. I've got a number of follow-ups there. I wanted, just as a little bit of context before we get into some of those, to take a look quickly in the rear view. You were sharing the timeline of kind of when the store opened, the Australian Grand Prix. It sounds like there was an F1 activation there recently as well. One thing that not everyone may know is that Culture Kings was one of Tapcart's early enterprise customers. I think that the initial app launched sometime in 2021, like right around or shortly after I joined Tapcart in mid 21. There was a huge commitment to the channel. You guys did what I think is still the most impressive giveaway that anyone's ever done to launch their mobile app. Monica, do you have like any recollection of kind of how that went, what the prize was that we could share with the audience?
Yeah. Our team gave away a Culture Kings Paisley wrapped Lamborghini, which was obviously, something that made a big splash. I think that's a very Culture Kings thing to do. We definitely go hard or go home. And then, we've obviously had some conversations about that was kind of like the 1.0, and then now we're kind of in the 2.0, 2.0 phase. And I think it's really exciting to, as we've really, especially in the US, like expanded so much and have really, made a splash out here as well, and how we continue that momentum into the second phase, with our app and with Tapcart. So those are really exciting things to think about. I think, again, we've talked about this before, but like our app users are our best customers, and we want to make sure that they have the best experience. Yeah, a lot of good stuff on the horizon.
For sure. And I think that that's a good segue to kind of the middle period between the 1.0 and 2.0 that you references, wanting the customer, as you said, to have the very best experience. John, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about kind of timing and prioritization and pacing. And it sounds like our organizations fell a bit out of sync for a period there, and Tapcart and its platform and its innovation was lagging, candidly, a little bit behind where Culture Kings had established its brand standard and where it wanted to be and needed to be. And there were also maybe some competing priorities or alternate visions internally about launching a headless site, potentially going custom app. And there was a period there where we actually stepped back from Culture Kings stepped back from the Tapcart mobile app, and we were down there for about a year. And I'm curious to know any context that you have that you think would be relevant and valuable to the audience on why that decision was made, or what you were trying to accomplish, or what other things might have been top of mind and not, maybe it wasn't the best time, to be prioritizing the app and really leaning into that channel hard. But I guess just anything that comes to mind for you that's relevant in sharing some of the context, some of the whys behind from a strategic perspective, from a decision maker's perspective, I think would be interesting.
Yeah. Launched pre-me. I was part of the group that said, hey, why don't we take a pause on this? And I think, the point around timing is almost everything. It's like sometimes you just got to get it right before you get clever. And I think, to be honest, if you think about where we were just starting to bring this thing to the US. I mean, it was like we had a lot of figuring out from a brand strategic standpoint, like how are we going to have an impact in the US market, one of the most just competitive markets in the world, right? So we had a lot on our plate at that time too. So, I was like, what is the app going to do for us? How's it going to create just this brand affinity, delivering unique content or unique access? Like, we do some things now. It's by the way, TapCart, the mobile app for Culture Kings is the most highest performing channel we have when it comes to, just conversion rates of, 124% higher than it is on some of our other channels and platforms. So, against the web in particular. But if you look at where we were at that time, we didn't really have too much of a strategy of how best to kind of handle that from a content standpoint and a strategic standpoint. Today, we drop stuff early. You'll get it 2 days before on the app. We were talking downstairs about, some of the things we have in the store. We have a secret room where it's one of ones or one of very few. It's like, do we actually have that experience on the app and not online and only in the store and on the app? So strategically putting like value propositions behind some of these capabilities in the platform itself. But the app at that time, to be quite honest, we weren't ready to really even support it, and I think at the time there probably just wasn't technology, kind of built into it that was going to have tons and tons of value. So yeah, sometimes it's best to stop, reset, build out the playbook and get back after it.
Yeah, no, I think that's well put. And candidly, I think that we were lagging a bit behind where we ought to have been from an innovation standpoint, from a flexibility standpoint, and, having the feedback from, I guess, losing temporarily that relationship, that valued customer was great motivation and insight for the team to lean in and innovate and build some of the things that we're rolling out today. And I'm really excited about a number of those capabilities. I know that you guys are as well. And I think that the merchant community, broadly speaking, is going to receive App Studio and some of the other product rollouts in a really excited way. You mentioned a little bit earlier that you've got a number of exciting activations on the horizon. F1 feels like it's going to be an annual thing. Is that like going to be a part of the operating cadence pretty much forever?
As long as there's a race in Vegas, yeah, we will activate. We definitely want to always like leverage the big moments that are happening in Vegas because, it's right in our backyard and we have such an amazing space. And it just all kind of feeds into, we talk about this all the time, but like it feeds into the flywheel. We get the content, we get the experience, and I think there's so many different opportunities for us to bring value to our audience. Like I said, like I think that's something that I'm really excited about. But we do have, like WrestleMania is coming up in April, and there's so many different big moments that happen throughout the year in Vegas. EDC is a big festival, music festival that's coming up as well. So you can definitely expect us to activate around that. And I think as we continue to build on all of these activations and partnerships, there's so much room for us to integrate the app into that and give that sort of exclusive VIP experience to our app users.
So some of the, I guess, new functionalities that we're deploying with App Studio and a couple of our recent product drops allow for a more unified experience. And we're going to go more in depth a bit later this evening with Shopify on that. I know that you guys are Shopify POS customers, and there's a lot of cool ways that we can make the experience more connected and more seamless from a data ingestion standpoint, from a customer facing standpoint, from a variety of different experiences that you can craft and deploy in whatever way you might like. I hear from each of you as you talk about the brand, as you talk about the ethos, as you talk about the strategy, exclusive comes up a lot. Mm-hmm. Experiential comes up a lot. I'm curious to know a little bit more about why exclusive, why experiential, how does that benefit the sales volume at the end of the day? Is there anything that comes to mind for either of you on just the strategic value in exclusivity might be, what the strategic value in experiential might be for other merchants that may not have leaned into that as heavily as you have? What advice would you have for them about why that's a good idea and why that's something that they should pick up?
Why don't you take a strike number first, though?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, we are sort of like anti-transactional. We are, like you said, very experiential. We're very focused on exclusive experiences, product, etc. I think, streetwear, like at its roots, it was all about being exclusive. And we have this concept of being like exclusively inclusive. So again, like historically, streetwear has always been very like, oh, we want to keep it to this like very small group. But what we do is build really cool experiences through product and events. And we want people to be able to experience and access. So if you are someone that's creative, you care about your style, you put effort into self-expression in your outfits, we want you to be a part of this experience. And my advice to other brands would be to just don't be afraid to take risks, and that's how you're going to get that sort of like disruptive, I guess, marketing and disruptive in whatever industry you're in. I think there's just so many ways to tap into the emotion of that, right? If you're buying something just for the purpose of wearing it, like that's cool. But our customers, like they buy something, they feel like they're a part of this community because they truly are. And we want to connect with them as much as we can, whether it's through them coming into the store, whether it's them experiencing the latest reels or TikToks that we've posted on socials, or they're in the mosh pit at a music festival. We want to be there with them. And I just think that, in a world that's so focused on digital, which is still very important, people crave community, people crave experiences, and that's why we're focused on building that through everything Culture Kings.
Yeah, I double down. I double down on that. I mean, it's like it's that emotion. It's that emotional piece. It's like it's where we all work in a place where you're servicing a pretty competitive market, right? I mean, there's no lack of a place to do it to get product, but there's not a ton of places you can fully experience like just brands. We talk constantly about like being where the kid is, how the kid is. And that's digital first, and we talk about we're brand first. We talk about being product first. And talk about exclusive product, like this store in particular, I mean, we run around a 50-50 of 1P, our own brands, and 3P brands that kind of like tell out this full story, like A6 Keanu 14s and, 948 frame headwear from New Era. Like I was saying, that New Era headwear, we got like about 96 to 99, depends on the week and the month, of how much it was exclusive. But we kind of have this ability to like deliver this cool to kids. Valentine's Day was one of the most successful, headwear launches we ever had. Little box of chocolates with 940s. And we just had wild success, but we're telling stories. And if you're not telling stories and building that emotion, you're just supplying more stuff to a market that's already got a lot in it. And you just got to create difference. You got to create emotional experiences of the brand. Even brands they've known and loved for years. If you can reframe them and redeliver them in a unique way, whether it's content to an app or having Matroda from EDC coming in and doing literally, I think we had like 300-400 people down on this first floor, and he's doing DJ sets for I don't know, 2 hours. So just new ways to kind of build it out. And whenever you can like connect product to that story, like we had exclusive, product for EDC. We did some stuff with Callow Planet maybe 2 years ago where we had put a boxing ring in on the first floor, and he was doing his media training there. And there was a full minimal, another one of our in-house brands, minimal assortment of product. It was exclusive just in the store, just for that event. So you can buy in and have an experience of that. So yeah, we're selling dreams sometimes. So.
I have layers of follow-ups, but one of the things that I heard you mention a moment ago, Monica, was be a disruptor, take risks. We've had some previous conversations. As a marketer, like I feel at times trepidation when I'm about to make a big bet. How is this going to go? Is this going to work? How am I going to be perceived if it doesn't pan out the way that I wanted or expected it to? And you mentioned some really cool things just about the culture that you've all created and how you're supported. And I'd love to hear, John, kind of from you a bit about how you fostered that culture, what like your belief system around encouraging your team to walk out on that limb and be a little edgy and try things that may not have been tried before, that may or may not work. Just how do you think about that? How do you approach that?
Well, it's interesting. It's like Culture Kings, even the founder of Culture Kings, Simon Beard, when he built this thing, he and I share a lot of this, like, let's just go tear at stuff, right? And go try things. And I remember Monica and I talking, forever ago about one thing we're going to do here at the store. And it was like, well, what if it doesn't work? I'm like, who gives a shit? that's kind of who we are as a brand, right? So, we literally have that in some of our framework of a brand, if you know what I mean. It's part of the fabric of who we are. Another part with the US, like in particular, is like we're not a big team. So we're making calls. Everyone's empowered. Very few people are disconnected. Everyone knows what's kind of on point, what emojis we should be using, what we shouldn't. Sometimes we become obsessed about some of that stuff. But in my opinion, like if you look at like brands that are like having impact in the market, brands that are moving needles, they're doing things first. I like to think that a lot of stuff that the way we think about them, like, and you said something earlier, what you consider a good partnership or consider valuable, it's like, you have to look at like, just because we can do things doesn't mean we should be doing them, right? There are lots of things we could activate in this store. There's lots of ways we could take things to market. But I think as a company, we're constantly like, we're almost afraid of disappointing each other sometimes. We're kind of like just throwing at it so fast, taking big risks. And sometimes those risks are financial risks. Sometimes they're brand risks. Sometimes they're like, if this partnership optics doesn't look right, how does that impact us? If we do something with this guy, is that going to preclude us from working on this other thing with them in 6 months or a year? Or, how does that work? So yeah, there's no singular rhythm. So I think it's like in our little culture of what we build, people feel empowered to have a voice, sometimes maybe too much, to be honest with you. But all ideas that may move the needle or things we're talking about, like how do we just continue to make Culture Kings, disrupt the market and continue to innovate. So I think we're a little obsessed with it, to be quite honest.
I think just to kind of quickly add on that, I think because, like John said, we have a relatively small team, because we essentially have broke into the US market as the underdogs, right? There are obviously a lot of other brands that have been around for longer. They've been in this market for much longer. They have more money to spend. They have bigger teams, but by necessity, we've had to be more creative. We had to be more scrappy. So even though there's a big part of it that is like us taking risks and not being afraid to fail, I think there's also an element of like, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to make it, we're going to do it right. And we're going to go all in and make sure that we don't fail. We almost like have to succeed. So yeah, I think, that sort of scrappiness breeds creativity and innovation. And like John said, we just have such a good sort of rhythm within our team that everybody feels like they have a seat at the table, because they do. We've been talking about this unified commerce concept, and I think that really speaks to how we're able to tie everything in together, because the website experience has to feel in line with the retail experience, and we're all constantly in communication about what's going on with retail. How can we adapt it? How can we do this better? And everything is very relationships driven. And so we have to all be on the same page, and we have to be able to say, okay, I'm working with XYZ brand or partner, and we all can trust each other to take the baton and run with it wherever it needs to go. So yeah, I'm definitely very proud of our team in that way. And that definitely all starts from a foundational standpoint, like having that culture and everyone feeling empowered to have a point of view. John always talks about it. There's not really always a right or wrong, but you have to at least have a point of view.
Yeah, it's the one obligation at Culture Kings is you have an opinion. And sometimes those opinions are things we're going to go run after, and sometimes they're going to be things we think about. Sometimes they're immediately just something that we wire and go get after. So, but I do think to double down on a lot of what Monica just said, like just the idea of you can't be scared of it. You just got to go run after stuff. And we're all going to do everything we can to make it successful. So I think we're getting credit for that sometimes more than other places, and in some industries more than others. But this industry in particular of selling streetwear and selling the idea and the concept of streetwear, and streetwear means many different things now. 5 years ago it was in a completely different market. What footwear brands were moving needles has changed. Just trends in general. I'm still wearing skinny jeans, unfortunately.
And you look better in them than I do.
Thanks.
John's got his
You look better in a weed hat, so
Steve Jobs going on uniform.
I'm old.
So you can focus on thinking about being the president and not what you're wearing.
Doesn't take much time for me to get.
Decision fatigue's a real thing, though. No, but I think that the results speak for themselves. And I think that it's a pretty obvious testament to the culture you've built, the team that you've built. I think the team's been a dream to work with across this activation. I've been super impressed with all of your people and just their capacity, their ability. It's really been awesome. So kudos to you all for attracting awesome talent and building a great culture.
Yeah, likewise to you guys. You guys have a great team as well. It's been really awesome working with you guys.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So you'd mentioned earlier a couple of things that I wanted to loop back on. So the emotional aspect I think is really interesting. And Monica, you also said we want to be there with them, right? Wherever they are. And one of the things that stood out to me is like one of the things that's there with them, I would bet pretty much always, is a mobile phone. And you'd mentioned storytelling and how that's central to what you're doing in the physical retail space and just as a brand in general. How do you connect all of those concepts? Like, how do you take the story from the store out across digital channels and into different places and hopefully like into the pockets, of the potential consumers that you want to interact with? How does that story get retold and reverberated and repeated through other channels and other mediums?
Yeah, I think a huge part of it is obviously content. When we have an event in the store, obviously not everyone in the world can attend, but they can experience part of that through the digital content that we're capturing, whether they follow us on socials or they're subscribed to our email or they're on the app. Those are experiences that we can distribute to them through those different channels. And, I think it becomes this thing where if I'm across the country and I can't go to Vegas or I can't make it to any of these festivals, I want to be there one day. So one day when Culture Kings does come to my city, I'm going to be there because I have FOMO from missing out on that experience. So yeah, we have an amazing content team. We're all very much in sync. We're very much aligned. And again, John, with his creative direction background, he's very involved in that as well. We just all constantly give each other feedback and we're able to tweak the content or do it in a way that best reflects the brand, but also continues to grow and evolve with the brand. It gets better and better. Year one, we're shooting content, it's very high energy, very fast paced. Year two, we have 3D animations that, our teams literally they are investing in learning how to just stay at the forefront of innovation and the best tools and the best practices. And then, we really encourage that. And I think it has really shown. And you guys have a great creative team as well. I think they're very much can go head to head on creating, these animated assets. And yeah, I think that's just one of our weapons, honestly, and one of our strengths for sure, because you don't see that everywhere. And a lot of people are focused on what has worked in the past. And we're very hyper focused on the future and always moving forward. So
it's fun to watch that, actually. It's fun to it's also pretty cool to see how far we've actually grown, and then it's always the one up. It's like I was mentioning the Valentine's Day drop, we had the same thing the prior year. It's we're constantly one upping how we're going to create even a bigger moment for Culture Kings. I think there's we spend a ton of money in, Meta and driving the business from a paid perspective. But it's all one content engine that's driving all of that. So whether it's brand experience, recap videos of stuff with Lando Norris in the store and McLaren to just one off, we just dropped a little pastel pack for headwear around Easter, coming up in, a few weeks. So, and that's actually on the app right now. I think
it is.
Yeah,
it is.
So it's, how do we take this emotional thing that is Culture Kings and this one store in Las Vegas, which will eventually be more than one store, but how do we take what this thing is and this vehicle of brand and then drive that out to the whole nation? Cool thing about a place like Las Vegas is you got customers down there from all over the US.
And all over the world, really.
And all over the world. So it's I used to say early on 2 years ago, in particular 2 years ago, 99% of the people walking up to Culture Kings have never heard of Culture Kings. And then if you walked in, 50% of the product, of the total revenue from the product is actually coming from brands they've never heard of. So we got this kind of unique thing where we're trying to communicate this new brand and these new brands in this new concept. So it's a lot of new. I will say that Monica's point on the unique positioning of this flywheel of content that we have as a company is a pretty special thing. So it's something we hold very, very, very kind of high within things that we think are allowing us to have this continued growth. So yeah, content is king.
Yeah, amen. I'm curious to tug on that thread a bit further. So you mentioned the pastel collection that you've got that's sitting on the homepage right now at the very top for the average app user when they open up the app.
Yep.
One of the features that we're dropping and we're going to be kind of collectively announcing to the merchant audience that's going to come visit with us later, some functionality that allows us to make that content conditional. So for people that are a part of this activation that we're going to do, there's another block that sits on top of the pastel hats that's just for the unified commerce thing that we're going to do. And there's different content that we're pushing to them because they have been tagged on the Shopify side as meeting that condition. And I think that is like a first step on the yellow brick road toward what I think shopping is going to become more quickly than we probably realize in the digital space. And the expectation is that experience is going to be one of one, based on my tastes, based on my preferences that are different than Monica's tastes, different than Monica's preferences. We're going to go into the same mobile app in this case, and we're going to see different sets of content, maybe different merchandise, maybe different orders of, sequencing, all kinds of things. And what we have the ability to do with these conditionals is messaging related as well. So we can send push notifications and also render content conditionally that could eventually, drive down to the individual level. It's a one to few for the purpose of this activation. But you mentioned, let's go on a riff. Let's go on a journey together. You mentioned that you're going to do a WWE activation here at the store in the coming months. Like, what are some ideas that you have that could be relevant for that kind of thing? I mean, one of the other things that we're going to do in the activation is the mobile app will render only for people that are a part of this activation a ticket that gives them entrance to your secret room. So that was like, arguably a lame idea of how we could connect, the digital and physical with the mobile app, but like leaving it to the pros. What are some ways that you think about creatively fusing the digital and the physical around an activation like the WWE one that you have coming up?
Yeah. I think the exciting part is obviously we've gotten to a place that we can make it whatever we want to make it. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, that the app can very much be like a VIP ticket. Again, like these are the best of the best customers. And if they're in town for WrestleMania, which is going to be in Vegas, super exciting event, or they've purchased WWE merch before, we can tailor that messaging to them. And if they come in and they are shown certain, kind of push notifications about certain things, like maybe they have access to the secret room, maybe they have access to meet the talent, maybe they have access to open bar. I think we can tailor those experiences around that sort of VIP ticket concept. And I think there's so many different possibilities with it, not even just in the store in Vegas, but also when we go to Summer Smash or in Chicago, or when we go to Head in the Clouds in LA. Like there's so many different ways that we can tap into that. And I think that's really exciting because, again, we like to do things our way, and we are very specific about how we want to share these experiences with our customers. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I've got an idea for you for the music festival. So I mentioned my wife, Brisa, is a huge EDC fan.
Yeah.
And we were at a Steve Aoki show. It was at an LA venue, like near USC. And before Steve came out, he was headlining that evening. They showed a huge QR. The whole room went dark for like a minute and a half. And then the bright, 50-foot screen came on, and it was a huge QR code that drove to the online store. And kind of similar to what we've done together a couple of times with different games, we had Steve Aoki's creative director join us at a Lakers game shortly after that. And he uses a mobile app with TapCard as well. But the QR code went to the online store. And I was sharing just my experience with the creative director. Like, I mean, people opened it up, and when they saw that it was like just dropping on the homepage of the online store, I would venture to guess that 0 people made it all the way through checkout in that experience. And it really was ephemeral. There was really nothing that the brand got from that in residual value, and a better execution would have been to download the mobile app for some Easter egg, that would be available tomorrow morning or whatever. You just increase your subscriber count by 20,000 people or however many people were at the show. So I would encourage you to leverage that in that kind of setting, because I think that could be a winning tactic. But I'm curious to know, like, what you might have already tried or what other ideas you have that can generate more app downloads from your retail traffic and just kind of augment the day-to-day retail experience that you have happening downstairs. Is there anything that is kind of part of the standard playbook already, or anything that you've tried before or would be excited to in the future?
Yeah, I think, if you've ever gone into a Culture King store, whether in Vegas or in Australia, New Zealand, you know that we have a lot of different gamified experiences in the store. So, for example, if you purchase over X amount, you can do the sharpshooter challenge and you make 10 free throws in a row and you get a big prize. So I think there are a lot of those types of elements that we could bring to the app where, we could gamify it a little bit or have them be able to have access to win these, we call it NFS, not for sale products that you can only get if you are purchasing over a certain amount. And so these are items that, you can't buy it anywhere, right? And so I think those are experiences that, again, if you can't come into the store, you don't physically go into a brick and mortar location, you can experience that through the app. So there's so many ways I think we can talk to the app users. I think having that sort of direct line into their, like you said, into their pocket, whether we're at a festival or whether it's an event here, or there's some big, cultural moment happening. For example, the Dodgers win the World Series, immediately we can push that messaging out. And again, like kind of what we were talking about earlier, there are a million places you can buy t-shirts, hats, and hoodies, right? How are we creating those unique experiences? And where like you would rather, if you had a choice of shopping somewhere where you just go in and buy something versus where you go in, you experience something, you get an NFS product, you just create all these moments and memories, like just from getting a t-shirt, you would obviously choose the latter. So we want to, hone in on that as much as possible. And, I think the app is definitely a priority for that.
I'll close with two questions. So what is a common retail rule or brand rule that you violated intentionally? Like where is, I guess, what comes to mind as like a contrarian play that Culture Kings has run with success?
It's a really interesting question.
That's a really good question. I'm like, which one do we make? What do I start?
I don't know if, it could be an interesting way to think about it a little bit, but we talk about this a lot. We just had some strat meetings actually in the studio at the end of February. And we've been talking about this for 2 years, or even longer. It's like, if you look at the landscape of streetwear and what does streetwear mean and what are those ingredients that kind of formulate streetwear? We're an accessories and apparel first retailer. But we're existing in this space that is highly dominated by footwear, but yet we're very much like, exclusive headwear and exclusive apparel brands and then rounded out with like, the well-known brands as well. So to say that you can build a strong streetwear business, especially in the men's space, and be headwear, accessories, headwear and apparel first is pretty, I don't want to say contrarian, but it's definitely been interesting for us. It's like, how do you continue building that desirability? And it's why we spend so much time with some of our in-house brands like Loiter. Like, how do we grow Loiter? How do we accelerate Loiter? And we even moved the creative head, the guy his name is Isaac. He concepted Loiter many, many years ago. We moved him here to the U.S. In August last year. So I've been here for 6 months, lived downtown LA, like he's back in the culture kind of what he's feeding every day. So obviously that adds a lot to him of how he looks at product and trends. And, the U.S. is still leading so many of these trends. So we just got to do it better, and we got to do it faster, and we got to be first. And if you look at Loiter and what that thing serves is, inside of Culture Kings, it's significant, incredibly important. So I don't want to say we're doing something completely different, but we're certainly taking a whole different kind of approach at it than a lot of people in the space of traditional streetwear. Footwear's changed a lot. It can change as much as it needs to change. We're still an apparel and accessories first retailer, with the great likes of Asics and New Balance and Saucony and all those. A collaboration that Timberland announced there as Culture King's been running for years. It's become kind of a staple. So yeah, so we're having fun with it, but maybe just doing it a little differently.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but that's my answer.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to lead with headwear, the balding demographic is a key demo, I would have to think.
We'll set you over the white.
Bald guy that wants to recapture his youth feels wheelhouse for that strategy.
I think, yeah, one of the things that came to mind like when you asked that was, in my experience, a lot of brands, like from like a marketing standpoint, right, and a partnership standpoint, they show up at events in a very cookie cutter way. They do the logos on the step and repeats. I hate step and repeats. They're like, oh, I want to put my logo up on the screen. I want to do this. And that's not for us. Like, that's just not, it's not enough, right? Like, for you to be able to cut through, nobody cares if your logo is just on a step and repeat. Like, they want something, they want to experience something different. And so, like, again, you know, I use this example all the time, but like our content team, they're literally crowd surfing to get the shot. They're running on stage, they're throwing away giveaways, they're getting on the mic in front of tens of thousands of people. And we love that. And we like foster that environment and that culture, because that's, again, how you get close to our customer, at least. And obviously that's not the case for everyone. Everyone's business is different. But I think people and brands just need to start being a little bit more creative, because so much of that has been done already, right? Like, even, for example, like influencer marketing, so many people have done influencer marketing the same way. How can you do it differently? And I think just going back to the risk taking, I think that's definitely, for us, it's definitely a do. And I think there's a lot of room for other brands to do that, even if they're very corporate or very traditional retail. You know, like, these are things that I think everyone should at least test into, because that's how you're going to cut through all the noise. Like, most of these industries that we're in, DSC, you know, there's, whether it's apparel or, you know, another industry, they're all saturated. You know, it's not, we're not reinventing the wheel, but what we can do differently is the experience of it and how we come across, whether it's in content or activations. So
even, I mean, activations, like, to your point, like activations, I mean, even, you know, with Lando Norris, or, you know, we put a UFC cage down here and had Olivier and Cheeto in there, and like, you walked into a cage to actually meet these guys. Like, you know, it's like that incredible, like, I can never experience this again. But we're also not lining people up down the hall, right? It's like, if you look at a lot of the assets and a lot of like the images and video content, it's like you're up close and personal. It's like, there's no table where somebody's signing a headshot. It's not what we do. It's not the way we interact. You look at a lot, it looks like you're actually in it with this, you know, fighter or athlete or musician or whatever, in case of Lando, a driver for one of the most premier race teams in the world. So it's like, to be able to experience that, it's like, man, how do I do that? And that comes back to like delivering content. It's like, how do we deliver that experience to that kid that, you know, is in North Dakota, or, you know, you're somewhere else that just can't get to Las Vegas. We're one store, but we're a vehicle, and this thing is as much of a marketing engine as it is a place to sell things.
yeah.
So we're very critical of like how that feels, and like, you know, how can you create this experience for this kid to like literally walk up and shake hands with some athlete or musician or whatever in a way that is almost unmatched. And we're very aware of like how we can be different in that space. You know, in stores aren't new, you know, meets and greets aren't new, but you can reimagine them. And yeah, we don't need a logo on a step and repeat. I'd have our logo in a nightclub at 2:00 in the morning and Monica put up there, but
well, that's different. That's not a step and repeat.
That's totally true. I don't think I ever saw our logo on a step and repeat in a nightclub. But
No, yeah.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's always like, again, from a sort of like marketing and partnership standpoint, people are always asking like other people, how, like, what can you do for me? What value can you bring to me? But I think we think in a very much in a way that we're like, how do we bring value to you, right? How can we benefit you through our flagship space? How can we benefit you through our big, you know, social media audience or our email subscription list? I think all these different things are ways that, again, you know, anyone can cut somebody a check and say, here's $1 million. Like, we want to do this. But I think we approach it very much in a way that, like, how can we bring value to our partners and to talent? And how can we create moments that even the talent, they're like, oh my gosh, like, this is not just, like you said, like, not a sit down little tablecloth signing autographs. Like, I'm really like immersed in whatever this experience is. And I'm really excited about it because this is not something that I've done for my fans before, right? We've gotten to a really good place and rhythm where we know exactly like what we don't want to do. And then we know how we can, again, best bring value to the people and the brands that we're working with. And that's how we have been able to accomplish a lot of these things that we've done, these different collaborations, product releases, and events and festivals. It's all, again, very much like we're the underdogs, but we can bring so much value to you because this is how we're going to execute it.
Yeah, because of how we move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll close on this one.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I share with our teams and internally, like the go-to-market folks at Tapcart, is that we don't sell mobile apps. What we sell really is strategic prioritization. I mean, I think once the core group of decision makers at that brand decides, hey, this is a channel that we ought to prioritize, everything else falls into place pretty seamlessly. There's not like a lot that is really difficult to traverse beyond that point. And I think that you guys sit in an interesting place with the perspective of having owned the channel and run the channel for several years. Curious to know like what guidance, what advice, what feedback you would have for other groups of brand executives and brands that are also like crushing and doing well across the globe about the channel and why one ought to prioritize it, maybe some of the experience that you've had or advice that you would give to somebody that's kind of on the fence. Do I run this up the flagpole this quarter? Is this something that I punt until next year? What comes to mind?
I mean, I personally, not all companies are created equal, right? I mean, we all do different things. We all have different, infrastructure. We all have different capital. Like how we can take things to market. So I don't think it's like, what has worked for us very much has been like built by us, right? We took the bricks, we put them in the block, like, and that took time. I think if you look at something you were heading earlier, like, just like you're looking at the landscape of retail and like, how's it going to change? For me at that personalization side, it's going to become incredibly important. You're talking about the Yankees, and Dodgers World Series and that run, and we had an incredible inventory position. We had lots of great content. We were in a really great place to go capitalize on that. Last thing I want to do is go show some Dodgers fan a Yankees hat, right? So it's like, as you were explaining all this, some of the new framework and technology, it's like, so I do think like this idea, show me things I want to see, how I want to see them, in ways I want to see them, is going to continue to just be a top of mind. I mean, we have a very young base. I mean, I like, we can only really measure to 18 to like 25 is a kind of our strike zone, but really I think it's like we get down into the 16, we get down into 15, especially with the headwear side, with like some of the stuff that we're building there that's just unique and different and special. But if you walk out on this floor right now, you're going to go see some families from, Missouri that are, spending a weekend in Las Vegas. So, making sure you have stuff to service everybody. But we're really focused on this young kid. It's where everything starts. We are a builder culture. We're a builder company. We are creators and makers as a team. So I think like just anything that can allow us to take great content to market and be where the kid is, how the kid is, using the technology the kid is, to your point, our mobile phone, it's never more than 6 inches away from my hand, it seems like, is going to be paramount for somebody like us. If we're in a different industry, in a different business, I mean, it could be kind of hard to prioritize exactly what would be valuable to them. But I can tell you personalization, just being on trend, being fast, that flywheel of content for us, just like drop, which is incredibly important. We build our entire infrastructure and team around it. Anything that allows us to take that stuff to market and get in front of the kid quickly for these like emotional little periods of time. We want to be partnered up with. So that's why Tapcart and the app, and like I said, one of our best performing channels that we have within the business. So we'll be doubling down on all that stuff.
I think it's also sort of how much you're able to invest people, resources into it, right? Because it's not, in my opinion, it's very much not something where you build it and they will come. Like you build it, you tailor it, and you keep refining and evolving it so that they are getting the best experience. I think as a brand, I think that's very important for any brand to want to get closer to their customers. But that will only work if you have something of value to tell them, right? And you have something that's like, it's, whether it's exciting or it's super exclusive, like if you have something to communicate to them, then I think it's worth investing in that. There's just, again, there's so many different things going on. And as a consumer, I won't download an app unless I really care about the brand or unless there's some significant value that it's providing me, whether it's convenience or access. I think those are very broadly, different factors of why I would want to take up storage on my phone. And if I start running out of storage on my phone, I would start deleting the apps I don't really use, right? So like make sure you are not just providing value when you first launch, but like you have to have a continuous strategy on like how do I keep them engaged and how do I keep that real estate or those megabytes or gigabytes on their phone.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for all of your time, your insights. This has been incredible. Forward to the rest of the evening's festivities. Tons of gratitude on this side. Really appreciate you guys both carving out
Yeah,
some time.
thanks for spending time with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Cheers.